আজি কি cell the unit of life. Okay, before starting the chapter, as usual we should know what is the content of this chapter. A chapter to ami ki poribo deibo. As the name suggests, since we have to talk about the cell, we have to talk about the different types of cells also, right? We have to talk about the plant cell, the animal cell, the prokaryotic cell and the eukaryotic cell. After that, we need to talk about the cell organelles as to what is the content of a cell. Eta cell boli kole, inside the cell, you have certain things, right? You have to talk about each and every organelle that is present inside a eukaryotic cell and inside a prokaryotic cell. Next, talking about the cell, the next part, once you have discussed about the organelles, the next part of the lesson talks about something called as cytoskeleton, right? I don't know whether you have heard this word or not. Since what is a cell? It is nothing but a unit, no? It's a fundamental unit, or it's a structural unit of life, or it's a smallest unit of life. Since it's a unit, so unit eta hodai ki thakibo, boundary eta thakibo na thake. So cell will also have a boundary. Either it's a plant cell or an animal cell, or it's a prokaryotic or it's a eukaryotic. Each and every cell will have a boundary. And when I talk about a boundary, what exactly am I talking about? Kunkhon boundary kotha koisu je juntu niki protectu cellote present thakibo. It is the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. Apart from this boundary, certain cells have an extra boundary, and what we are talking about is obviously the cell wall, which is a characteristic of the plant cell, right? So ekhini portion discuss korim. Tar pisot cytoskeleton boli kole, what is the cell exactly made up of? When we talk about a human body is also made up of a skeleton, and the skeleton is made up of what? Bones, right? Similarly, the cell has a proper shape and size. If it has a proper shape and size, it has to have a proper skeleton. So we need to talk about what makes up that skeleton, right? Human beings are jenenge bones ere skeleton to bonua hoise, no? Thik teneke eta cellot skeleton boli kole ki bosture skeleton to bonua hoise, right? Next, this is the content, aru besi eku nai, right? But comparatively, it's like, as I am saying it in the first class, contents wise, it seems as if it's very less, no? Kinu porim eta cell porim and organelles, these are the things that we'll discuss. But obviously, if you have gone through previously, this chapter is quite long, right? Bahute dighol ar gutei khini, and it's an important chapter also. Bahut questions ahe yar pra, right? So you have to write a lot. Upai nai, right? So I think we can start. So first we'll start with the definition of a cell. Cell boli likha, cell likhi pelai likha. What is a cell? It is a basic unit of life. It is also called as, or it is also considered as, fundamental structural and functional unit of life. Next, when we talk about cell, we have to talk about a term that is called as cytology. Cytology ki hoy? The study of cells. Next, introduction of ekhini janibo lagibo, and obviously, yes, please ask. Okay, next is someone who discovered cell. Kune discover korisile? Robert Hooke, right? Robert Hooke. But what we know, the cell that he discovered was an example of a living cell and a dead cell. It was a dead cell. Yeah. So the next point hetu likha. Ar ki sai pelai discover korisile? Slices of cork. Very good. under the microscope and what type of a structure that they have seen. At a word asile no, honeycomb like structure. Very good. So, what is a cell? It is a fundamental unit of life or basic unit of life. Who discovered cell? Robert Hooke. The cell that he discovered was an example of a dead cell. You have to remember slices of cork and honeycomb like structure, right. Another information about Robert Hooke is about a particular type of a book that he has written, not very important, kintu ketiaba khudi dibo pare, right. Bahut questions aha nai. Next, since we know the one who has discovered the dead cell, we have to know the name of the person who has discovered the living cell also, right. So, who discovered the living cell? Living cell kone discover korisile? Leeuwenhoek, Anton von Leeuwenhoek. So, next point likha. The name of the scientist, Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Right, who discovered living cell? Anton von Leeuwenhoek or Leeuwenhoek buli monot rakhile hobo. Next, discovered living cell, and what was the living characteristic that he has observed? He saw that certain cells move from one place to another, and moving from one place to another, this character is considered as a living character. So, the first part of the lesson, kisuman scientist or naam janibo lagibo. The first was Robert Hooke, second is Anton von Leeuwenhoek, the third one. So, Robert Hooke got number 1 dibasun. Likhi loa. right? Next is a scientist is on a question ahead, right? Dujardin and Purkinje. Question to keneke ahe? Who has given the term protoplasm, right? Protoplasm, the term was given by Purkinje. Protoplasm was also called as Sarcode. Who has given the term Sarcode? Or the question could be, protoplasm was called as Sarcode by, right? So name of the scientist important. And lastly, we have this scientist, Robert Brown, discovered nucleus. Yeah. Next, we have to talk about the cell theory. Heading kora cell theory. Questions from entrance point of view, cell theory, what is cell theory or what are the points that was discussed in that cell theory generally teneke nahe, right? From entrance point of view, the question that is asked is who proposed the cell theory, first point. Second, I think you all know there were two scientists behind, Silden and Shawn. The question that is asked is who was the botanist and who is the zoologist, right? And what is that something that the cell theory could not explain? What did the cell theory say? Cell theory has spoken about the cell, no? Cell to kenekwa je tar membrane ase, each and every cell has a nucleus, each and every cell maintains a continuity or connection within themselves. So these are certain things that the cell theory speaks about. But the question generally is not asked, what does the cell theory talk about? Question is, what did the cell theory been able to speak about? It could not say how new cells were formed, and whenever we talk about new cells forming, we have a word called as totipotency, right? Cells bilak eta cellor pra antu cell hoy no, notun ke to form koribo nware. So ei je process to eta cellor pra aru eta cell hoy, a new cell always develops from a pre-existing cell, and this process is called as totipotency, and this totipotency could not be explained by the cell theory, right? Then we have to talk about the exceptions of a cell theory. So let's write the note, kunkhini important mo mark kori dim. And from both point of view, obviously cell theory points gita mukhasto koribo laibo. Question aibo pare, write a note on the cell theory, right? What did it say and all those. Right. So the question has been asked about Schilden and Scott. Question has been asked about who was the botanist, who was the zoologist. Question has also been asked about its nationality, German, ne British, ne French, ne ki. Right. So all the three words you need to study. All living organisms are made up of cells. There is always a coordination between two cells, 2 or more cells. First we'll write the note. All cells are basically similar in structure and metabolism. Each cell is made of small amount of protoplasm having a nucleus and bounded by a cell membrane with or without cell wall. Some information about the nucleus. Contains genetic material and this nucleus normally pass from one generation to the other. Right. So, what did the cell theory say? The cell theory said that all organisms are made up of cells, right. Second, all the cells have a connection with themselves, they maintain a continuity. Third, each and every cell will have a nucleus, each and every cell will have a cell membrane with or without the cell wall. I think we know these points, right, plant cell, animal cell or basic difference kita. Next, it also talks about the nucleus. Eta cellot keita nucleus thakibo according to the cell theory. Each cell will have only one nucleus, right. And talking about nucleus, nucleus contains the genetic material, we understand. Talking about genetic material, DNA and RNA, and then normally it passes from one generation to other. We are talking about karyokinesis. When a cell divides, two process occurs, that is karyokinesis and cytokinesis. So, what happens during the process of karyokinesis? The mother nucleus divides and form two nuclei, right. So, ultimately ki hoy je mother nucleus to etu duta generation of jaigoi, right. And so, that is the reason why we are writing it. Normally it passes from one generation to another. Okay, coming to point number 2, there is always a coordination between two or more cells. What we understand that if we are talking about cells, all the cells or they will remain in a group. Jedi groupot ase protekto cellor majot eta ki thakibo, continuity thakibo. So, can you name me the structure through which the continuity is maintained? Okay, let us make it more simple. If you are talking about a cell like this, it is structured kun cellor. Plant cell and animal cell. Generally, we are talking about if you are drawing this, then obviously a plant cell, right. So, we know eta plant cell to nathake, bahut plant cell thakibo na ekelage, right. So, this is cell A and this is cell B. According to the second point, what did they say? Each and every cell will maintain a coordination, right. Cell A or cell B connecting link to janu ne? What is the connecting link? Huh? Please say. No. Something called as plasmodesmata. Ami jete cell wall porim, tete plasmodesmata will write in details, right. So, as of now what we know, this cell plasma membrane, corpora originate kore hetu pisot porim. As of now simple ke eneke we have a connection between two cells, and the connection between two plant cells is called as plasmodesmata. Another point is plasmodesmata is absent in case of an animal cell. That does not mean animal cells does not have a coordination amongst themselves. They have another structure that is called as desmotubule or junction. As of now, we know cells maintain connectivity, coordination. Since we are talking about a plant cell, keneke maintain kore by a structure called as plasmodesmata. Kune plasmodesmata form kore olop pisot. Right? I think these points are understood, right? Next likha, the cell theory could not explain how new cells are formed. So, if you look into the points, it has explained almost everything except this question. So, later a scientist called as Rudolf Virchow, very important, he explained that new cells are formed from pre-existing cells. So, this is a word needs to remember, and for this he has given a term cellular. Okay. Kuntu spelling lage. Omnis. O-M. Okay. O-M-N-I-S. Omnis. C-E-L-L-U-L-A-E. Aru C-E-L-L-U-L-A. Right. So, the cell theory could not explain this point, and so it had to be modified, or it had to get modified. Modify kune korisile Rudolf Virchow. So, the new theory that he has given is also considered as modern cell theory, which is also called as cell principle or cell doctrine. So, the cell principle or cell doctrine could explain ki how new cells are formed. Juntu niki cell theory explain koribo para nasile. Right. Next, regarding this, we have some other names also. Law of cell linkage, not very important. Hegita saba. Cell, the words, only the words. Okay. Modern cell theory is also called as, it's also called as cell principle or cell doctrine. From entrance point of view, question ahe, the omnis cellulae is cellulae was proposed by, what is the meaning of this line? The meaning is this one. new cells exist from pre-existing cells. Aru ei bostutue ki hoisile cell theory explain koribo pare ne? Next. So now since we know something called as cell theory, what are the points that was discussed in the cell theory, we have to know what are the exceptions of the cell theory. Yar par bahut questions ahe. So the next heading that you will write is exceptions likha to the cell theory, by exceptions of the cell theory. Let's write it down first. Okay, if we are talking about exceptions to the cell theory, the organisms, the first organism that we talk about, right? So we see, so cell theory ki hoy, we understood. What are the points that are written about the cell? We have already discussed. Now we have certain organisms that does not fit into the theory, and the first of them being prokaryotes. Now the question is, why prokaryotes are considered as an exception to the cell theory? Because cell theory ki koisile, each and every cell has a proper nucleus, but prokaryotes ki na thake, nucleus na thake, right? So on that nucleus factor, bahut bilak exceptions ase. So prokaryotes are exception to the cell theory. Similarly, aru ketaman ase, jeneke RBC, right? So question keneke ahibo? Find out the exception to the cell theory, or identify the organism that is an exception to the cell theory. What is the reason behind exception? Hetu question aha nai. Right? Next. Dekha poa nai? Okol tumar hoise ne baki students oru hoise? What about the rest of the students? Can you see the board clearly? Okay, tomorrow common sake network problem hoise. What is it that you could not see properly? Koi dia, I can dictate. Mature RBC episode, sieve tubes. Sieve tube naam khunisan nai? Have you heard about sieve tube? What is a sieve tube? Something related with what? Something related with vascular bundle. If we talk about vascular bundle, what are the cells we are talking about? Xylem and phloem, right? So we know xylem is made up of 4 cells and phloem is also made up of 4 cells, right? Sieve tube, example of key, one cell of the phloem, right? Sieve cell and sieve tubes asile, right? Okay, next is the next organism that forms an exception to the cell theory is virus, viroids and prions. As far as virus is concerned, this is something that everyone has heard about it. No? Virus ki microorganism eta, right? Okay, what is the difference between a bacteria and a virus? There are so many differences, but the most important point of difference, with a cell wall, without a cell wall, right? Bacteria cell wall ase, virus or cell wall nai, right? Next, obviously, bacteria is considered as living, virus is neither considered as a living nor it's considered as a non-living organism, etc., etc. Virus, we have certain idea. As far as viroids and prions are concerned, for those students who has completed biological classification, that ami basically poram bostutu, right? As of now, viroids and prions ki hoy, whenever we talk about a virus is made up of 3 parts. It has the outer shell, it has the covering called as capsid, and it has a protein structure and the genetic material, right? এই তিনটা part যদি present হয় তেতিয়াহে তাক আমি virus বুলি কওঁ. Out of these 3 parts, if any part is missing, then that subviral particle could either be called as a viroid, it would be called as a prion, or it could be called as a virusoid. A virus, if a microorganism has to be called as a virus, it has to be made up of 3 parts. Right? Bahiror eta envelope thakibo lagibo, eta protein cover thakibo lagibo. Suppose we are talking about like this, no? Envelope, a protein cover, and the genetic material. 18 part jodi thake, then only this organism would be considered as a virus. There are certain organisms out of these 3 parts, no, any part might be missing. Maybe capsid khone ba protein shell khone na thake, maybe genetic material to na thake. So, jedi jikono eta 3ta partor bhitor eta parto absent hoy, tetia hole we don't use the word virus, instead we use the word called as subviral agents. Right? Subviral, something smaller than a virus, right? When we talk about subviral, there are 3 types of subviral: viroids, prions and virusoids, right? What is a viroid, what is a prion, biological classification, I mean details or pisot korim, right? As of now, virus, viroids and prions are also exception to the cell theory. Kiho karne? Because these are not considered as a cell, right? Living hole he cell consider koribo, non-living of cell buli kobo niki. We know virus is neither living nor non-living. If it is in a living state, then only we can consider virus as a living. But if virus is in a non-living state, then can it be called as a cell? No. And when will a virus be considered as a living? Only when it is inside a living host. Jedi bahirot thake, tetialeke virus to living buli ami consider nokoro. Eta living host or bhitorot thakibo lagibo, tetiahe hi cell buli consider kora hoy. But what did the cell theory said? The cell theory said that everything is a cell. But we know now virus is not a cell. When it's not a cell? When it is not inside the host, right? Okay. Aru viroids aru prions or jodi okuman information lage. Smaller than a virus, so it is called as subviral. Viroids lack protein coat and prions aru virus ki hoy, virus or eta envelope thakibo, eta protein coat thakibo aru genetic material thakibo. The third exception right? Cell theory ki koisile eta cellor matro eta nucleus thakibo. But these are also cells, but they have multinucleated condition or they show sinusoidal condition. So, these organisms are also an exception to the cell theory. If you are talking about phycomycetes, have you heard these words, no? Phycomycetes, ascomycetes, basidiomycetes, these are nothing but fungi, right? And if you are talking about Vaucheria, it's a type of algae, right? So, these are certain examples of cells which have more than one type of a nucleus, and so it does not fit into the category or into the points of cell theory, right? So, in the chapter called as plant kingdom, if you have studied about that algae part, algae, I mean 3 types of algae porisu, no? Green algae, brown algae and red algae, right? This part is not included in your course, right? Only we have to talk about 3, but there are 4 types of algae. Another example could be Vaucheria ki hoy? A type of yellow-green algae. Jeniki green algae boli kole, there are certain examples of green algae. If you are talking about red algae as a group, there are certain examples of red algae. Similarly, green, yellow-green algae is a group of algae, and in that group, Vaucheria is an example. Okay. What is the meaning of the word cenocytic? Multinucleated condition is also called as cenocytic. So these are the exceptions of the cell theory from entrance point of view. Yar pra bahut questions ahe. Question to ki ahibo? Show or identify the organism that is an exception to the cell theory, and maximum question has been asked about these three, right? Aru juntu nucleus na thake tar pora basic question ahise. That does not mean we are not going to study. You have to study it, but point number 1 and point number 2 important, right? Yes, please ask. What? I hardly can make out who is saying. Ki hol thanda lise. On koi bole. Chua na. Koya. At question Thorason. So lack nucleus, no? Eto prime maximum question hai. So just to have an idea, kenuka dhorono question. This question could be related to the chapter plant anatomy also. Not necessarily say eto all eto chapter pra question hai. What you need to remember is the word called as enucleated. Enucleated mane lacks a nucleus. Who lacks a nucleus? The sieve tube lacks a nucleus, right? You all want it or what? AC lagi? Yeah, there's a difference in more fan con na. There's a difference between mature RBC and normal or young RBC. When the RBC cells are formed at the very starting, no, copra form korbo, at the mature dobra form korbo, when it just starts formation or just starts growing, it has a cell, or sorry, it has a nucleus. As it matures, we know that RBC mori jai thake, no? It's not the same RBC cells that's going to continue throughout the lifespan. It has a time period, no? At a lifespan thake RBC cell to. So mature RBC cell othe nucleus na thake. When they are formed or when they are young, the presence of nucleus is seen. So that's the reason why we have to write that word mature RBC and not simple RBC, right? Okay. Next, coming back to the chapter, ebar likha characteristics of a cell. Some of the characteristics we have already discussed. Yeah. So when we are writing in the form of a note, then obviously we have to write a lot. But when we are studying for the entrance, or maybe you are studying for the exam from MCQ point of view, it is the few points that we select, right? So please put in the habit of making a short note. As far as characteristics of a cell is concerned, if I have to write a note, then the first point that I will write is cell is the basic unit of life, right? Tumalke a note likhisa, so you have to write it. That does not mean you have to study that point also, because it's very well understood, right? So okol jodi tick kori disu no, tare short note eta banai pele prepare koriba exam or karne. And notes likha homoy sob likhiba. Just keep on writing. Okay. Characteristics of a cell, first likha. Again that same line, basic, fundamental, structural, functional unit of life. Okay. Next is, if you are talking about a cell, what is the basic medium of a cell? Cell, right? It is inside the cell that each and every metabolism or each and every reaction occurs, right? The basic material of a cell is called as, or the inner contents of a cell is called as, in a general term. So, if you go precisely, tetahe naam to beleg hobo. Kintu in general, if the question is asked, if you are talking about a cell like this, ekhon ki hoy? The boundary of a cell, inside out ki thakibo? A gel-like substance. This gel-like substance is called as what? Cytoplasm or protoplasm. There is a difference between cytoplasm and protoplasm, right? We will be talking about it later. But as of now, ami ki kom, the basic medium of a cell is protoplasm, right? When is this liquid or when is this gel-like material called as a protoplasm, and when is it called as a cytoplasm? Kiba common difference ase, right? Eketai bostu, eta cellor bhitor jotki material ase tak cytoplasm buliyo kobo pare, protoplasm buliyo kobo pare. Kintu kiba eta conditionot ami tak cytoplasm kom, kiba eta conditionot we will talk about it as protoplasm, right? We will talk about it later. As of now, etu likha, the basic medium of a cell is protoplasm. Next characteristic, so cell might have a cell wall, it might not have a cell wall, but it is always limited Next, each cell has the capacity or power of regulating vital process. Seven, in each cell, genetic material is present. DNA replication, protein synthesis, universal. Next, each and every cell shows totipotency. It is self-regulating and it responds to stimuli. So, these are certain characteristics of a cell. I think the points are understood. So, if you are talking about a cell, these are the things that we can say about it, right. Have you heard this word living content of a cell? A line to kunisa niki. What is that which is considered as a living content of a cell? Exactly. It is the protoplasm, right. Whether a cell is living or dead, keneke identify koriba? Presence or absence of protoplasm. So, protoplasm is considered as a living content of a cell, right. This is over. I want it. Complete this, and in the next part what we will be talking about is the words cytoplasm, protoplasm, nucleoplasm, etc., right. Eta ketia he material kinik cytoplasm koba, ketia he liquid material kinik protoplasm koba, we will draw a chart for that. If this is over, please tell me so that I can rub the board. Whole goal? Okay, finished? Okay, এখন chart লিখাছোন অকমান ডাঙৰ হ'ব দেই, don't start writing there. Okay, so we are talking about a cell. If you talk about a cell, we understand that it has a boundary. What is the boundary we are talking about? Plasma membrane, or maybe it can have an extra one, that is the cell wall. Oh. So, eta cell loi pelai what you do? Take a cell and remove the cell wall. If you remove the cell wall, the content that you have in your hand Amar question ahisil, what is protoplast, right? So, what is a protoplast? A cell without the cell wall is called as a protoplast, right? So, this chart will give you the definition for protoplast, protoplasm, cytoplasm, etc., right? So, what is a protoplast? A cell without the cell wall is called as a protoplast. So, you take a cell, remove the cell wall, tamane cell membrane onwards, whatever is the content, that portion is called as a protoplast. Second question, it might be asked, protoplast is devoid of cell membrane? No, it contains cell membrane. Protoplast has the cell membrane. Protoplast is devoid of the cell wall, right? Next. Now, we will take the protoplast, and from the protoplast this time remove the cell membrane. Prothomote ki remove korilo? Cell wall. What is protoplasm then? So, as I said, we will be talking about the terms called as protoplasm, cytoplasm, protoplast, etc., right. So, protoplast, in this chart you will have a proper explanation. Protoplast mane a cell without the cell wall, protoplasm mane a cell without the cell wall and the cell membrane, right. So, we are talking about a cell, right. Suppose and all the organelles, etc. What you have done? You have removed this. Next step, you have removed this. So this one is the inside content is called as protoplasm. So if the question is asked, is nucleus contained in the protoplasm? Yes. Yes. Are the organelles included in the protoplasm? Yes. Take the protoplasm, remove the nucleus. The content that is left cytoplasm ki hoy, protoplasm ki hoy, with the nucleus, without the nucleus, right? So cytoplasm ki thakibo? Very good. SOL, yeah, cytosol. Cytosol, which is also called as hyaloplasm. So if the question is asked about the definition, looking at the chart, we can define the terms, right? What is cytoplasm? The gel-like constituent that is devoid of only nucleus, cell wall, cell membrane, and the nucleus, right? Cell organelles are a part of cytoplasm, right? Nucleus is not a part of cytoplasm. Cell wall is not a part of cytoplasm. And even from that cytoplasm, if you remove the cell organelles, that just ki thakibo, okol gel to thakibo. That only gel without the cell organelles is called as ki cytosol, right? So this is something that's important. Next, kisman points likha so. So now, since we have talked about the introduction of a cell, we have an idea how does the cell look like. We have ideas about the terms called as all this cytosol and cytoplasm, etc., etc. Next, what we need to discuss is we have to talk about each and every part of the cell in details, starting from the cell wall, the plasma membrane, the specific organelles, etc. So next part of the lesson we will be talking about the cell wall. But before discussing about cell wall, ketaman point ami extra janibo lagibo. So points puli likhi pelai likha. Something about mycoplasma. Hunisila ne mycoplasma? Biological classification, we have done mycoplasma, right? What is so unique about mycoplasma? Smallest cell without a cell wall. Without a cell wall, point to here important. Because smallest cell boli kole bacteria smallest cell, right? We are talking about the size of a cell. Question এটা দি দিছো so that you study this one also, right? Size of ওপৰতো question আহিছে. So the question either arrange in the ascending order or arrange in the descending order. মই ডাইৰেক্ট আনসাৰটো দি দিছোঁ. Egg is also considered as a cell, right? Chicken egg এটা cell, ostrich egg, any bird egg, প্ৰত্যেকটো এগক কি বুলি কনসিডাৰ কৰে এটা cell বুলি, right? So when this question is asked, ostrich eggৰ কথাও দিছিলে, so we know that this will be the high or it will be the largest one. Yeah, please ask. 0.0. 7.0. Okay. এখিনি হৈছে ন? Isolated ostrich egg মানে কি? What is the meaning of the term isolated? Ostrich egg and isolated ostrich egg. Ostrich egg inside the body of the bird. Isolated ostrich egg away from the body, right? That is isolated ostrich egg. Since we are talking about cell, so we have to talk about the largest unicellular plant. কি আছিলে? ক'ত পঢ়িছিলোঁ? Plant kingdom. Plant kingdom কৰাইছোঁ ন? Plant kingdom we have completed. Largest unicellular plant. Heard this term called as umbrella plant. আঁকিও দিছিলোঁ. কি হয় algae, green algae, right? I think that's all. Next heading koriba types of cells. Reflection করেছে acetabularia, you want a spelling? acetabularia, acetabularia. Acetabularia with diagram we have explained during a plant kingdom class, right? Please refer to that algae portion, no? Ekdom beginning of that algae. Introduction algae, আমি এটা plant এনেকে আঁকিছিলো if you remember. Something like this. That চাইলো বা. Okay, I think it's over. So next, types of plants. Types of plants of কি পঢ়িব লাগিব? Eukaryotic and prokaryotic. So divide the page into two, eukaryotic or prokaryotic heading kora. So certain points of differences. So talking about cells, either it will be a eukaryotic or it will be a prokaryotic. Some of the points of difference we already know. What is the basic difference between a eukaryotic and a prokaryotic? We always talk about in terms of the nucleus, right? A cell that has a well defined nucleus, a cell that does not have a well defined nucleus. But that does not mean that is only difference, no? We have so many other differences also in terms of ribosomes, in terms of certain types of proteins that both the cell contain. So we will be discussing the major point of difference and not all the points of difference, right? This one major point I may discuss for you. So likha. Okay, basic ki jano, nucleus present, nucleus absent. Just tell me another one. Cell organelles, yeah, membrane bound cell organelle is present or absent, right? Hey duta common hoy. The second point is about ribosomes. Ribosomes shuniso? What is a ribosome? It is a cell organelle. It is the smallest cell organelle. Those students who have studied this chapter before, ribosomes are a birat important question I have. What is asked? A cell organelle without a membrane or membrane-less cell organelle. We will be discussing later. As of now, if you are talking about ribosomes, what is the most important function of a ribosome? যেনেকৈ mitochondria ক'লে আমি powerhouse of a cell বুলি কওঁ ন, ribosomeৰ সবতছে important কাম কি? Protein synthesis, right? So ribosomes would be present only in case of eukaryotic, prokaryotic, or it will be present in both. Obviously it will be present in both, but the type of ribosomes in both the cases differ, right? A type of ribosomes বুলি ক'লে, any idea what are the types I am talking about? Ribosomes, duta word khulisa, 70S and 80S, right? 70 in our biological classification class also, when we have drawn that structure of the prokaryotic cell, tate ami ribosomes ki mark korisilo, 70S type of ribosomes, right? So 70S type of ribosome is a characteristic of a prokaryotic cell, whereas both 70S and 80S are characteristics of a eukaryotic cell. So if you write the 70S type of ribosome is present in a prokaryote and 80S type of ribosome is present in a eukaryote, the answer would be wrong. Because in case of a eukaryote, it's not only 80S, you see the combination of both. And to be precise, you have two cell organelles inside a eukaryotic cell where it has 70S ribosome. And what I am talking about is mitochondria and chloroplast. বাকি বিলাকত কি থাকিব 80S থাকিব, কিন্তু mitochondria আৰু chloroplast তাৰ ভিতৰত কি থাকিব 70S. So the statement that we say is both 70S and 80S type of ribosomes are present in case of a eukaryotic cell. As far as 70 and 80S is concerned, What is it talking about? Ribosome ki hoy? It is a cell organelle. What is 70S type and what is 80S type? Details in the ribosome class, right? We will be discussing here in this chapter itself. But 70S and 80S talks about the size, talks about the structure of the ribosome, right? Ribosome boli kole, we draw something like this. This is the most common type of ribosome, right? It has two units, one smaller unit and a larger unit. Talking about their sedimentation coefficient, we write the letter S, 70S. Tamane eta ribosome sedimentation koribo, sedimentation coefficient kiman, right? Because okay, let's not discuss now. When we will be talking about ribosomes, at that time we will be talking about 70S and 80S. 70S ki hoy, 80S ki hoy. As of now, ribosomes are called as protein factory of a cell. It is of two types, 70S and 80S in broader sense. 55S ও আছে, ঠিক আছে, বেলেগ বেলেগ টাইপও আছে, কিন্তু in broader sense আমি কি কো, two types of ribosomes, 70S and 80S, right? So ইয়াতে কি লিখিম, 70S type. Okay, talking about nucleus, nucleus absent, nucleus present. In case of a prokaryotic cell, the nucleus is also called as nucleoid. Inside the nucleoid, what will you see? Genetic material. Genetic material in the form of what? Nucleus of it ki thake, chromosomes thake, right? What is the number of chromosomes that a eukaryotic cell has and what is the number of chromosomes that a prokaryotic cell has? If you are talking about number of chromosomes in case of a eukaryotic cell, it differs from species to species, right? Humanot beleg thakibo, belegot tigerot beleg thakibo, dogot beleg thakibo, etc., etc. In case of a prokaryotic cell, since they do not have one defined nucleus, the entire genetic material is considered as just one chromosome. So prokaryotic cellot chromosome kiman thake? Just adult. Aru eukaryotic cellot kiman thake? Many, right? Out of the points that we have written, it is important, this is very common, it will question nahe, right? This is important, this one is important, right? Nucleolus Kunisano? Have you heard this term, nucleolus? What is a nucleolus? The dense content that is present inside the nucleus is called as nucleolus. Second point, nucleolus with a membrane or without a membrane? Obviously without a membrane, right? Okay, the next point, this one is also important. Protein synthesis occurs in Where exactly can you see protein synthesis in case of a prokaryotic cell and in case of a eukaryotic cell? Protein synthesis ক'ত হ'ব? Wherever ribosomes are present, tate protein synthesis hobo, right? So if I ask where does protein synthesis takes place, the area where the ribosomes are present. So the point is, in case of a eukaryotic cell, where will you find the ribosomes? In case of a prokaryotic cell, where will you find the ribosomes? Forget about, yeah, please say. RER, rough endoplasmic reticulum, is it only present in there ne aru kobat thakibo? Aru belegot thakibo, exactly. So that is the point that we need to study. So the first point is, whenever we are talking about protein synthesis, we understand wherever ribosomes are present, protein synthesis will occur there. In case of a prokaryotic cell, ribosomes kot thake? Which part of the cell? Prokaryotic cell, we are talking about the bacteria, that diagram that we have drawn in our previous classes. Eta eneka diagram akisilu no? Something like this. So ribosomes asile nai? Obviously asile. Kot asile? In the cytoplasm. So where does protein synthesis takes place? In the cytoplasm only, right? Whereas in case of eukaryotic cells, protein synthesis ক'ত হ'ব? Endoplasmic reticulum, if you are talking about like this, like this, like this, like this, right? So if you are talking about eneke ribosomes asile, so it is not that the ribosomes are inside the endoplasmic reticulum. Inside ot asile niki? It's only on the surface. So protein synthesis ক'ত হ'ব? Is it inside the endoplasmic reticulum or in the cytoplasm itself? Cytoplasm itself. So in the eukaryotic cell also, protein synthesis occurs inside the cytoplasm plus inside mitochondria and chloroplast. We have already discussed that point, right? Have you heard the word plastid? Plastid shunisu? So plastid or eta example kwa? What is a plastid? It's a cell organism, right? Plastid is the characteristic of a plant cell ne animal cell. It's a characteristic of a plant cell. How many types of plastids you know? Or give me an example of a plastid. Yeah. Chloroplast is an example of a plastid, right? There are certain words called as leucoplast, chloroplast, chromoplast. Eblak ki hoy? Plast jod word to thake, that is nothing but a plastid. So plastid is a cell organelle that is present only in case of a plant cell, right? Plastid or bhitorot ki thake? What is the content of a plastid? Pigments. So if you are talking about chloroplast, the most common pigment that we talk about is obviously chlorophyll, right? So yate ami chloroplast nai lekha, kintu what we have written plastids. So while we are writing plastids, it's well understood that we are talking about chloroplast also. Next, talking about a cell, we see a structure called as vacuoles, right? Talking about vacuoles, we use a term called as sap vacuoles. What is a sap vacuole? Ki hoy? Plant cell etat largest area kune occupy kore? Vacuole, right? The vacuole or inner contents of kami ki boli kom? Sap, right? And so the inner contents of a cell in general inside a vacuole is called as ki? Sap vacuole, right? So it is kotha to hol, sap vacuole present in prokaryote ne absent in prokaryote? Think about that diagram again. We have drawn this. Remember, we have drawn somewhere here like this, if you remember the diagram. Yes, Sule. First question, are vacuoles present in bacteria? No. What is a type of vacuole that is present is called a pseudovacuole, right? Pseudovacuole or ki thake? Air thake. Type of pseudovacuole or pseudovacuole is present in which type of bacteria? Only in those bacteria that is found in water, because it contains water, it contains air and it helps the bacteria to float, right. So, what we can say is true sap vacuoles are absent in case of a prokaryotic cell. Okay, very good. Okay, next likha. What is the difference between a sap vacuole? Vacuoles or types of vacuoles আমি discuss কৰিম পিছত. এতিয়া as of now এটো লিখা. Something about flagella. Flagella is a characteristic of a prokaryotic cell, eukaryotic cell, both. Both, right? So, what we have to talk about is the type of protein that is present in the flagella. Prokaryotic flagella is made up of, eukaryotic flagella is made up of. And second word is about single stranded flagella is a characteristic of prokaryote and it is made up of flagellin protein, important, and in case of eukaryotic cell the flagella is double stranded . Tubulin protein, right? Name of the protein important. Remember plasmid? Plasmid কি আছিলে? Extra genetic material. So, extra genetic material that is called as plasmid is a characteristic of prokaryotic cell, absent in case of a eukaryotic cell. Talking about cell division. Cell division is a characteristic of prokaryotic, eukaryotic both. It's a characteristic of both. Talking about cell division, how many types of cell division occurs? Two types in a broader sense. Kiki? Mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis and meiosis present in is seen in prokaryotic cell or not? Bacteria cell mitosis meiosis dekha pam ne na pam? Right? It is only a mitosis or what we say binary fission, right? cholesterol hopanoids plasma membrane যেতিয়া কৰিম then we'll discuss. So cholesterol is present in case of eukaryotic plasma membrane. Hopanoids instead of cholesterol is a characteristic of a prokaryotic plasma membrane. What is the type of genetic material that you see in case of prokaryotic cell? Bacteria cell eta genetic material ase nai? Obviously ase. What is the type of genetic material? When we talk about genetic material DNA or RNA, we have talked about the presence of DNA. Dash type of DNA is present. We are talking about the shape of the DNA. Single stranded dash DNA, circular DNA, right? And in case of eukaryotic ki hoy ami jonto etu diagram dekha pao no etu double stranded aru ki hoy the shape helical. Question is cyclosis present or absent? In case of a prokaryotic cell, it is absent. Hold. So there are so many points of differences between a prokaryotic and eukaryotic. We have just mentioned the important ones. Next, आपको दुटामान point लिखा. Cell বুলি ক'লে there are certain words that come to our mind, no? Unicellular, multicellular, prokaryotic, eukaryotic. Right? Generally what we think is unicellular organisms are small, first point. Second, unicellular organism seems to be prokaryotic. Out of unicellular and multicellular, which one is supposed to be primitive? Obviously unicellular is primitive. Out of prokaryotic and eukaryotic, which one is supposed to be primitive? Obviously prokaryotic is supposed to be primitive. So we have a tendency to believe as if all unicellular cells are prokaryotic in nature, but is the statement correct? No, right? Give me an example of a unicellular prokaryotic cell. Bacteria, very good. Next, prokaryotic multicellular or an example kwa. Biological classification, refer to that. It's a prokaryote, but it's a multicellular. Blue green algae, right, or cyanobacteria. Eukaryotic unicellular eta example, The most common example. Are eukaryotic multicellular, anyone? So, up till here what we have studied is, we have just started with the introduction of this chapter. We have talked about what a cell is, something called as a cell theory, something called as exceptions to the cell theory, who has given the modern cell theory, who has explained the concept of formation of new cells from a old cell. So, the name of the scientist, that is important, right. Next, talking about cells, two type of cells to be precise, prokaryotic and eukaryotic, the points of difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic, and certain points that we have written. The next part of the chapter, we need to talk about something called as a cell structure, right. When we talk about cell structure, again we have to talk about the structure of a prokaryote, structure of a eukaryote. Structure of a prokaryotic cell, since we have already discussed during biological classification with the proper diagram and the labelings and all the information regarding the cell, we are not going to do that now. Jedi koi structure of a prokaryote cell, ami bacteria cell to le refer korbo paro ne noaro. Aru hekinto ami already korisu, there is no point of repeating it again. So, what we will be discussing is structure of a eukaryotic cell, and talking about the structure of a eukaryotic cell, it has been divided into two types, a plant cell and an animal cell. So, diagram and the points of difference. I think this is the part that we are going to do in the next class. Okay. As of now, kiba doubts asil neki? Eukaryotic multicellular example lage tumalkok? Likha Parinta Sharma. Buji paisa ne? Yes. So, eukaryotic multicellular jiman bor dekhisa sob to nijor naam bilak likhi lole hobo. Okay. I think that's all for today. Thank you. Oh, okay. Eto bondho koribo jane ni kunbai? Hana? Okay. I think the result has come out. Richa Roy. 70, very good. Then